We must try to find a live specimen.
Hello survivors and welcome to Survivor's Guild, the only channel that determines your odds of surviving 1990's King of the Spider movies, Arachnophobia. So stay tuned till the end for your survival stats. I'm your sharp-dressed slasher turned horror host, GhostFake, and today we'll be taking a look at 1990's super effective take on the fear of spiders, Arachnophobia. But first, go ahead and smash that like button like it's a spider or something, and go ahead and squish that subscribe button like it's a damn spider or something, and go ahead and stomp on that share button like it's a spider or something. Also, feel free to check out patreon.com/survivorsguild. For just $1 a month, you can help us here at Survivors Guild learn what the hell we're doing, as well as gain access to some Patreon-only perks, like early access to my regular videos and patrons-only content. So if $1 falling out of your pocket over the course of a month wouldn't bother you, consider losing it our way at patreon.com/survivorsguild. Also, if you're a big fan of scary stuff, then you're gonna love this video's sponsor, Local Legends.
Okay, so I'm out here. I have walked out into this road here. I have my spirit box.
The purpose of the Rougarou is to terrify children, essentially, into behaving the right way.
Yeah, I definitely heard something.
We do keep hearing footsteps behind us.
They're not going to mess with us?
Yeah, well, they might, but, you know, they really can't hurt you much. But they're, yeah.
I don't mean to be an ass. We gotta run. They're screaming noises getting closer. Are the legends real? Are you real?
Thank you, Local Legends, for sponsoring this video. Now I hope you like feeling like you've got spiders crawling over your body, only to find out that there are spiders all over your body, because this movie is getting spoiled. Arachnophobia, directed by Frank Marshall and written by Don Jakoby, Al Williams, and Wesley Strick, starring Jeff Daniels, Julian Sands, John Goodman, Harley Jane Kozak, and Stuart Pankin. Arachnophobia is about a big city doctor and a big spider that arrive in a small town to start new lives, and their paths inevitably cross when they move into the same house. We open up to this nature photographer named Jerry Manley, who is traveling in the Amazon to meet with an entomologist named Dr. James Atherton to document his pursuit of and potential discovery of any new species. They board a helicopter and fly out to the site that they'll be investigating. They land in a remoter area and head into an even more remote area where they will be looking for new insect species. Jerry discovers a large web after falling through a smaller one and takes some pictures. The crew sets up these funnels and containers around the large tree, and Dr. Atherton prepares his gas gun thing, which will kill the insects in the tree, causing them to fall to the ground where they can be collected for future study. But while investigating a potential new species of butterfly, they hear something large drop into one of their containers, and they turn their attention to it. It turns out to be a rather large spider, and they begin hearing more of them fall. Dr. Atherton comments on the strange markings on the spider, as well as it being highly unusual that there would be so many of the predator in one tree. Dr. Atherton wants to collect a live sample.
We must try to find a live specimen.
And lucky for them, they are able to find one. But before they can head back to camp, one of the spiders stows away in Jerry's bag. They get back to camp, and Dr. Atherton immediately starts studying the potential new species of spider, and comments on the lack of reproductive organs, comparing it to a drone similar to bees or ants, before he tells Jerry to go get some rest, as Jerry has been sick for the last few days, and his fever has returned. Jerry goes and lays down as the spider general lurks around his tent, and when he can feel something under his blanket, he reaches for it and the spider bites him. His body begins seizing up, and Jerry seizes his way into the meat bank at deposit number 1. They find his dead body and put it into the homemade coffin and ship it back to his hometown, unaware of the Spider General hitching a ride. The body arrives in Canaima, which was apparently founded by the Illuminati, and it lands at the Kendall Funeral Home, where the mortician, Irv Kendall, lets the family know that it's going to have to be a closed casket funeral.
Decided on an open casket, but we should maybe reconsider.
for obvious reasons. The general spider, having lived off of Jerry's juices, escapes the crate and takes off after a dog, before getting picked up by a crow. The crow flies over to the property of the Jennings family, who has recently moved to Canaima from San Francisco, to establish Dr. Ross Jennings as the town doctor, before the crow succumbs to the spider general. We get introduced to Dr. Ross Jennings and his wife Molly, who are taking in their new house and trying to convince themselves that they made the right decision. Their son, Tommy, comes running out of the house complaining of a box that had a spider in it. We learn here that Dr. Jennings has arachnophobia because of an incident that happened to him as a child. He calls his wife to come deal with it, and she catches the spider and puts it in the barn to give it a new home. Unfortunately, this barn is also where the spider general has decided to take up its residence, and later that night the two spiders put aside their differences and begin their romance. Some days later, we get introduced to the town doctor, Dr. Metcalf, who breaks the news to Dr. Jennings that he is going to postpone his retirement, which is a real problem since Ross Jennings moved here to replace him. When he leaves, we get introduced to Sheriff Parsons, who is writing him a ticket before getting shooed away by Margaret Hollins, who rips up the ticket and has Dr. Jennings walk her to her vehicle. She lets him know that she wants to be his patient, since she is not a big fan of Dr. Metcalf. Later that day, after he breaks the news to his wife, he gives Mrs. Hollins her first checkup, and in spite of his hopes, she is totally healthy. He finds out that Dr. Metcalf has put her on a blood pressure medication that he believes she doesn't need, so he takes her off of them. She decides that to drum up more business for him, she will throw him a party the following month. While back at the house, Molly notices that their pet spider has been very busy. Holy burn it down, burn it all down. And later that night, we see that there is already an egg sac that is hatching. Cut to a month later, where, at Mrs. Hollins' house, she is throwing a party for Dr. Jennings, where he gets introduced to more of the townsfolk. And when the party wraps up, Mrs. Hollins has an unexpected visitor. That night, the spider skulks around her house before dropping onto her hand and dropping Mrs. Hollins into the meat bank at deposit number 2. The next day, while Dr. Jennings is finding out that the wood in his cellar is rotted, Molly mentions that she can't get a hold of Mrs. Hollins to thank her. He heads over to her house, where he finds her laying in the meat bank. The sheriff has Dr. Metcalf give his opinion on what killed her, and he says that with her history of high blood pressure, it was probably a heart attack. Dr. Jennings lets him know that he took her off the medication, leading Dr. Metcalf to blame him for her demise. But Dr. Jennings wants an autopsy to show what killed her, and he won't be satisfied until that happens. Some days later, we get introduced to Delbert McClintock, the town exterminator, who has come by the Jennings house to check for termites. He doesn't find any, but he suggests that they tear out the bad wood and put in good wood.
So what do we do?
Tear out bad wood. Put in good wood.
Cut over to the high school where Dr. Jennings is discussing crickets with Coach Beechwood, and they realize that they haven't heard any in a while. Dr. Jennings gives the football team a physical before they go out for practice, but during the practice a spider climbs into Todd Miller's helmet, and mid-play plays Todd into the meat bank at deposit number 3.
Miller, you alright? Coach!
After the funeral, Dr. Metcalf is at home on the treadmill before he goes to sleep, where he and his wife are discussing how unusual it is for two apparently healthy people to have died so suddenly. And we see that one of the hybrid spiders is in their house. The spider climbs into one of his slippers, and when he goes to put it on, the spider bites him on the toe. Damn! They see the spider running away before Dr. Metcalf slips into the meat bank at deposit number 4.
I'm having a seizure. Evidence. Call Jennings.
His wife calls Dr. Jennings, and he heads over right away. He shows Milton Briggs the spider bite on his toe. Milt doubts that it was a spider bite that killed him, but Ross wants an autopsy done anyway. Days later, the toxicology report comes back, and Milt lets Dr. Jennings know that Dr. Metcalf died from some unknown toxin. Upon hearing this, he tells Milt that he wants to have the other two bodies exhumed for autopsies, and Milt says that he'll agree to whatever Dr. Jennings says. And later that night, we see that the king and queen spiders relocate their egg sac into the Jennings house. After doing some research on local deaths and spiders, Dr. Jennings gets in contact with Dr. Atherton in regards to Jerry Manley. Dr. Atherton enlists one of his aides, Chris Collins, to head to Canaima to investigate the deaths. He arrives as they are excavating the bodies, and he confirms the spider bites when he examines them.
You still think it's a coincidence?
That's a spider bite.
He calls Dr. Atherton and lets them know the situation, and that they are considering quarantining the town. Dr. Atherton lets them know that he'll be there the next day and asks Chris to try to find him a live specimen. The next day, Dr. Jennings, Chris, Milt, and Sheriff Parsons head to Dr. Metcalf's house to find a live one and capture it. Sheriff Parsons finds a dead one in the box of cereal that he is munching on, and Collins collects it. They continue looking, as a dead specimen is not very useful to Dr. Atherton.
Venezuela, why?
until they find a living spider and they capture it under a wine glass. Cut over to the Beechwoods house where Delbert has been called following an incident with an arachnid. He searches for the spider and doesn't find it, but he finds one on his way out of the house, and when his spray won't kill it, he uses his boot.
Yeah, that's right. I'm bad.
Cut over to Dr. Jennings, who meets with Dr. Atherton to discuss Jerry Manley and the possibility that one of those new spiders traveled to Canaima, munching on his body. They examine the live specimen that they've now killed, where Dr. Atherton points out that its fangs are disproportionately large, and it has 3 venom sacs. They test the venom on a mouse, which quickly dies. He also notes that this spider has no sex organs, which would make it a drone, which is a trait not seen in spiders, aside from that new species that he found in Venezuela. He explains that the Venezuelan spider must have mated with a house spider, creating this deadly hybrid, but that the good news is that their accelerated growth rate would suggest a very short life cycle, and that the lead spider will typically have a central hub, and that the drones will spread out in a pattern from there. He goes on to explain that the male will eventually create a queen, which will eventually create reproductive offspring, thereby killing the town when it is overrun by killer spiders. Dr. Jennings believes that the infestation must have started at the mortuary and tries to call Irv Kendall, who is sitting down to enjoy some spider popcorn with his wife Blair and watch Wheel of Fortune. Dr. Atherton notices the pictures that Molly took of the web in their barn and asks Sheriff Parsons to take him there, while Delbert, Collins, and Jennings are on their way to the Kendall's house, where they discover that Irv and Blair are hanging out in the meat bank at deposits 5 and 6. Cut over to Dr. Atherton and Sheriff Parsons, who have discovered the nest in the barn. Dr. Atherton sends Sheriff Parsons to go get the others and bring them to the barn, while he investigates the nest. Meanwhile, the other 3, having not found the nest at the mortuary, break out a map and map out where the attacks have occurred, leaving Dr. Jennings' house smack in the middle of the area, so they head there. Cut back over to the barn, where Dr. Atherton is investigating the web full of mice and cats. He rings the dinner bell to coax the spider out.
Supper's ready.
And that it does. And when the spider jumps out onto him, it coaxes Dr. Atherton into the meat bank at deposit number 7. The terminating trio return to the Jennings house, and Dr. Jennings tells Delbert to destroy whatever is in the barn, while he and Collins go get his family out of the house. Delbert grabs his special poison and heads into the barn just as the spider heads out of it. He begins spraying the stuff on the spiders, which basically just melts them, before he discovers the body of Dr. Atherton. Cut to inside the house where Dr. Jennings and Collins have entered, and they find Molly and the kids in the living room watching TV. They continuously look around when Molly notices a spider crawling on the TV, and then the house starts bursting at the seams with those little bastards. They try to leave out the front door, but it's sealed with spiders, so they head upstairs to come up with another plan. They hide in the bathroom, but the spiders start coming in under the door. The family and Collins get out of the window and begin climbing down, but before Dr. Jennings can get out, the window gets overtaken by spiders, and when Collins tries to climb down the trellis, it falls away from the house, injuring him. Just then, Delbert shows up with his poison and starts dousing the house.
Come on, take that.
Dr. Jennings leaves the bathroom, but when the spiders start dropping down on him, he drops off the railing and straight through the rotted floor into the wine cellar, where the queen spider is protecting its egg sac. Dr. Jennings starts putting 2 and 2 together and realizes that the egg sac must be down here somewhere, and so must the queen. He manages to avoid getting bitten by the queen when it sneaks up on him. Trapped in the cellar, Dr. Jennings arms himself and begins looking for the egg sac and a way to destroy it. The queen gets the drop on him and he swings his shovel at it, not realizing that it's hanging onto the shovel. And when the spider goes for his hand, he launches the shovel at the breaker, electrocuting and popping the queen. Oh, gross. He then looks for the egg sac, and when he finds it, he goes and grabs a lighter and a bottle of wine. He starts dousing the egg sac with the wine, but he gets jump scared by the spider general, and when he falls backwards, he brings a shelf with him. The spider tries to land on him, but he bats it away with a bottle of wine. He begins chucking bottles of wine at it to keep it from coming towards him. He climbs out of the debris and uses a can of spray paint to try to light the bugger on fire when it hides from him. When he loses sight of it, he drops his guard, giving the spider the chance to drop on him. He grabs the spider and throws it across the room, before running into a floor joist and falling onto the ground. The spider slowly approaches and walks along his leg, but when the spider general walks onto a piece of wood, Dr. Jennings launches the spider into the fire. Just in time for the egg sac to hatch. He looks around for a way to destroy it, but the general spider leaps out of the fire and charges him. It leaps at Dr. Jennings, but he grabs a nail gun and shoots the fighter right back into the egg sac, igniting the newly birthed spiders and exploding itself. Oh, gross. before he gets jump scared by Delbert, who has made his way into the cellar to help him out. Cut to sometime later in San Francisco, where the Jennings have moved back to, and while Molly and Ross toast to being back in the city, they are hit with a mild earthquake. They go to check on the kids when they get hit with another earthquake, and the movie ends. So now, to find out, what are your chances of suffering survivor's guilt? This is where we take a look at our main characters and the death that surrounds them to determine your odds of surviving this movie. And today's stats are brought to you by Local Legends.
We start off our meat bank deposits with Jerry Manley, the photographer who didn't picture himself as deposit number 1 into the meat bank, followed by Mrs. Holland, who turns lights out as deposit number 2. Next, Todd Miller gets permanently benched when he becomes deposit number 3 into the meat bank, followed by Dr. Metcalf, who should have gone shoeless, as deposit number 4, followed by Irv and Blair Kendall popcorning their way into deposits number 5 and 6. And we wrap up our meat bank deposits with Dr. Atherton, who serves himself up as deposit number 7 into the meat bank. Now let's take a look at our survivors. We've got Dr. Jennings, Molly, Shelley, and Tommy Jennings, Chris Collins, Milton Briggs, Dilbert McClinton, and Sheriff Parsons. So that means out of a total of 15 characters, 8 survived, giving you a 53.33% chance of surviving this movie. Giving those odds, how many spiders would you have to see before you just light the house on fire? Let me know in the comments below.
Thank you, Local Legends, Burton Moran. Make sure to go check out Burton and his channel, and thank him for bringing us today's stats. And if this is your first time on my channel, go ahead and subscribe before you jump over to Local Legends and thank him for delivering today's stats. And subscribe while you're there. And feel free to check out patreon.com/survivorsguild. And special thanks to my patrons: Chris D, Sackhead Ed, Bubba T, Maximilian H, Macabre Python 18, Video Creep, Populio, Valentina P, James H, Mintrix, Brady D, Matthew, Vids for You, Mr. Nightmare Fuel, Megan H, and Maxwell the Kaiju Man. Thank you all so much for the support. It seriously means the world to me. And as always, guys, thanks, and don't die.
Okay, so I'm out here. I have walked out into this road here. I have my spirit box.
The purpose of the Rougarou is to terrify children, essentially, into behaving the right way.
Yeah, I definitely heard something.
We do keep hearing footsteps behind us.
They're not going to mess with us.
Yeah, well, they might, but, you know, they really can't hurt you much. But they're, yeah.
I don't mean to be an ass. We gotta run. They're screaming noises getting closer. Are the legends real? Are you real?